world, just rolling along, just rolling along. I'm sitting on top of the world, just rolling along.
Welcome to episode 7 of the Solo Dungeon Crawler Solo Roleplay podcast. It's been quite a while since I last recorded a video, but on and off in the background I've been experimenting with some different bookkeeping techniques. I got really into doing everything on paper for a while, as it just felt like a really authentic embodiment of old school gaming. However, this is far too time consuming in terms of making a video. So back to the drawing board I went, and I dabbled with Fantasy Grounds for a few weeks, which is a virtual tabletop. Very good, but for me, VTTs just don't have the flexibility needed to create a good OD&D campaign. Combat trackers are not good for working with group initiative or chainmail troop combat, and more or less all features presume you're playing a game involving lots of ability rolls, feats, powers, and so on. And OD&D is nothing like that, so I discovered some cool techniques using Google Drive to do all my tracking and bookkeeping. Google Sheets is really good for tracking characters, XP, incomings and outgoings, and so on. And Google Draw can handle moving tokens across a scanned map. So, fingers crossed, I've found an approach that might help me be a little bit more productive when it comes to making these videos. That being said, let's get into this episode by returning to my OD&D Castle of the Quest solo campaign. So before I get into the next adventure, I want to touch on experience points. It seems up until now the party have had it too easy, as I've neglected to factor in the level of the dungeon versus the level of the character in regards to XP calculation. Men and Magic does make it quite clear that if a character is at a higher level than the dungeon level they are operating on, then any experience points gained should be relative. So in Ilara Nightshade's case, for example, any XP from either monsters or treasure acquired should be divided by 4 if she is operating on a first level dungeon, as she is a level 4 character. I'm not going to retrospectively go back to the beginning and recalculate everything. I think it's better to let the character's current XP scores stand. However, going forward, I will be paying much closer attention to XP rewards, ensuring they are relative, and I'll also be applying the guidance regarding monster XP values found in Greyhawk. On the last Underworld expedition, the Questing Knights earned a grand total of 6,000 829 XP, 6,153 for the treasure they acquired, and 676 for the monsters defeated. Sadly, 2 new members of the group were killed, Elrin Stormborn and Ileana Sunshroud. This means that the XP will be divided 7 ways for the survivors. That's 975 XP each. So first I apply the 5% or 10% bonuses for characters I have with high prime requisite scores, and then these totals are ratioed for each character higher than the level of the underworld. So Ilara Nightshade, for example, gets her 975 share of XP and applies her 5% bonus to bring the total to 1,023, and then this is divided by 4. Ilara therefore gets just 255 XP, and she still needs 5,231 more points to take her up to level 5. Brother Bar, on the other hand, is able to obtain level 5 to become a curate, and Hilda and Drago both become heroes, and Galantia a vicar. Regarding support and upkeep costs, there is a bit of ambiguity in Underworld and Wilderness Adventures in regards to how often these costs should be paid. However, I do think it's intended to be a monthly cost, as the support and upkeep costs for hired men-at-arms is listed as a monthly cost. Curiously, though, the typewritten draft of D&D indicates that these costs are weekly when working in the Underworld. And this got me to thinking about how I can streamline my equipment tracking, as not only can this be tedious to do, it becomes negligible when characters are bringing up enough loot. So I came up with the following rules. Support and upkeep covers replacement of any lost or broken equipment, so things like arrows, spikes and so on only need to be tracked during any single adventure and can be presumed to be replaced during any character's downtime. Support and upkeep is paid weekly during periods of dungeon expeditions and monthly during periods of wilderness adventures. Once these living costs become high enough due to character advancement, it can be presumed to cover costs of all types of basic equipment up to 150 gold pieces. So taking these rules forward, the questing knights are currently due to pay 532 gold pieces for support and upkeep, as this is 1% of their overall experience point total across the party. And the party must also pay 1,846 gold pieces tallage to the local ruler, known as Zarvok the Divine Oracle. The 3 clerics in the party tithe a further 264 gold pieces, and the party also squander 724 gold pieces on philandering, finery, and their individual professions. In order to cover these expenses, the party are forced to part with the silver bracelet and gold brooch they acquired and only obtain 80% of their original value for the trade. The party also lost the ornate music box whilst philandering. These expenses are based on a few new rules of mine to limit excess treasure in order to keep adventurers motivated. read my blog article, Things to Spend Money On in an OD&D Campaign Part 3, and this article is available at solodungeoncrawler.blogspot.com. With these expenses out of the way, the party approached the Adventurers Guild Hall to pick up 2 new party members. The new recruits are Thalindra Shadowweave, an illusionist with a 16 intelligence and a 16 dex, and Nyx Blackthorn, an assassin with a 14 intelligence and 15 dex. These new recruits bring in 180 gold pieces for purchasing their starting equipment, and this whole amount is spent, and all excess treasure, 2,196 gold pieces and 8 silver pieces, is taken to the Citadel of Divine Order, the largest lawful temple in the last redoubt, and there it is banked in a strong room, and the party given a marker to vouch for the amount later. With fresh blood in tow, the questing knights are ready to venture down into the underworld beneath the castle of the quest. They decide on the following order of march. In the first rank is Galantia, Drago and Hilda, and Galantia and Drago have missile weapons. In the second rank is Thalindra, Ilara and Nyx, and Nyx has a missile weapon as well. And in the third rank is Dorin, Bart and Samwise, and Samwise also carries a missile weapon. And this time the party enter the underworld via the northern bank of the castle moat. They find the previously discovered pit, which they must squeeze into one at a time to clamber down into the heart of a kobold lair. And the party carefully move 2 by 2 up a narrow natural rock tunnel, which immediately begins to narrow and curve, forcing them into single file. But they pass on as the tunnel curves one way and then another. After twisting incessantly, the tunnel eventually emerges into a larger natural cavern dotted with a couple of stalactites. The party head towards the southern wall of the cavern, where Hilda, the party's dwarf, attempts to open a sliding section of stone. But it doesn't budge an inch, no matter how much she puts her back into it. The party begin to retrace their steps back in the direction they came to find an alternative route. And as the party are making their way back through the northern part of the cavern, they are suddenly surprised by no less than 6 kobolds, 30 feet distant, emerging from the narrow tunnel, marching in single file. You'll notice I've left out the dice rolls that determine monsters' surprise, encounter distance, etc. I've basically just taken them out as they bog down the narrative a bit. the kobolds charge at the party, and as they emerge, they are able to fan out of single file. I'll be using the chainmail troop combat tables, as the combat is fantastic figures versus normal figures, i.e. characters with several hit dice fighting against half hit dice creatures. Kobolds can attack as Heavyfoot, but they defend as Lightfoot, at least according to chainmail. And the party attack as Armoured Foot. So I had kobolds as Lightfoot for attack and defense before, but have since cleaned up my act and got it right just by looking in the chainmail rules. And I'll cover how I calculate attack as ratings for monsters not listed in chainmail a bit later. So stay tuned if you're interested. So the party get 9 attack dice against the kobolds and need 4 to hit. 5 hits are scored and 4 kills. The wounded kobold has 2 hit points left. As troop melee is simultaneous, all the kobolds can make their attacks despite their casualties. They get just 3 dice and need a 6 to score a hit. They all miss. And as there are now only 2 kobolds alive, they will need to check their morale for excess casualties. They need an 8 or better to remain. Despite the fatal circumstances, these kobolds are braver than expected. Regarding the post-melee morale, I'm still getting used to it. The party have fewer losses, 0 versus 4, multiplied by 4, which is 16. The party also have more survivors. The current melee is 4 party members against 2 kobold survivors. I'm only counting those that fought, i.e. the front ranks at the moment. The difference is 2. The party get 28 points for their 4 armoured foot. The kobolds just 10 points. Party's total score is 16 plus 2 plus 28 is 47. Times that by 2 equals 93. Kobold's total score is 10 times 2 equals 20. So the kobolds must route 1.5 moves. So they flee 90 feet from the party with their backs turned and will attempt to rally. And the party want to avoid the kobolds alerting any more of their number, so they will pursue the fleeing creatures. Sister Galantia and Drago will fire on them with slings, firing as 4 figures on unarmoured targets will automatically allow the kobolds to take at least 1 stone in the back. They take 3 hits and both are killed. So the party continue on back into the narrow tunnel and they follow the tunnel back the way they originally came. The party hear a murmuring up ahead of them as they head towards the tunnel's crawl space, which leads back to the outside world above. They bravely push on, passing underneath the crawl space and following the tunnel west This time, a faint whisper can be heard from the eastern portion of the tunnel, and so the party are glad to leave it behind for the time being. The space in front of them eventually opens out to 20 feet in width, and they follow the tunnel as it curves in a southeasterly direction. Before long, the tunnel abruptly turns east, narrowing once again to force the party into 2x2. The party rest for 10 minutes at this point to catch their breath. And then they continue to follow the narrow tunnel until it begins to curve to the northeast. It continues more or less straight in that direction for some time. There is a loud thumping sound ahead of the party, which shakes the dust and fine debris from the rock ceiling above. The party emerge into a long cavern. They enter a slim opening in its east wall to follow another gently snaking tunnel. The rhythmic thumping turns into a sharp hiss. The party passed through an almost perfectly square cavern, suggesting a worked area. Its only exit, yet another very narrow tunnel which they scramble into. The hissing sound begins to fade now as the party navigate the rough-hewn stonework, which gives nothing of its destination away. It continues on and on, bringing the questing knights closer and closer to a scrabbling of some sort directly ahead of them. As the party emerge from the narrow tunnel into the 20-foot wide chamber that marks the outer entrance to the kobold lair, the scrabbling ceases to be a mystery as two kobolds make a lazy attempt to ambush the party and gain surprise. Despite making so much noise, however, they do manage to get as close as 20 feet without being noticed, but quickly realizing they are quite outnumbered by the party, they will act according to a random reaction roll. The kobolds offer the party a collection of precious metals they had stashed to one side in exchange for their lives. There are 300 silver pieces and 40 gold pieces on offer, as well as a very nice looking golden torque. The party decide to take the gold and the torque, but leave the silver. The party now move into the dungeon proper. They come upon a rectangular space with a crude table spattered with old wax drippings at its very centre. Crude hammocks hang in each corner, and 8 humans, all are slight and wear dark garments and hooded cloaks to hide their faces. They stand at the far end of the chamber, some 60 feet away. Initiative is tied, but as Ilara attempts to cast a sleep spell while the party's slingers prepare to hurl stones, the burglars who rolled a positive reaction offer the party directions through the maze to avoid this conflict. The party choose to heed them and will get 8 rolls on the random dungeon generator to fill in their map. The questing knights, seeing no other exits from their current chamber. Travel back to the outer entrance of the kobold lair. The lazy sentries do not disturb the peace, but instead turn a blind eye to the party, who, after all, are just passing through. The party cross a chamber scattered with heaps of bones and a pile of rags, shredded parchment and chunks of debris. They enter a narrow tunnel cut into the southeast wall, moving along past a cross intersection and then arriving at a second cross intersection. Next, they enter a southwest side passage, trailing off into the darkness. And as they move through this passage, they quickly find themselves wading through leaves at least a foot high. As the party are wading through in single file, spiders, disturbed by the rustling of the leaves, scuttle towards the adventurers along the left wall. The spiders win the initiative and are nearly upon the party, but Galantia and Drago have just enough time to fire upon them with their slings. They successfully flatten 3 spiders, forcing the rest to check morale. They fail and rapidly scuttle away in fear. Hilda takes the opportunity to search the leaves surrounding her. She doesn't find anything. So, in regards to how I handle searching in solo games, I have an article up on my blog called Searching a Dungeon Room in a Solo D&D Game, available at solodungeoncrawler.blogspot.com. So have a look if you're interested. As Hilda is searching, a carrion crawler attempts to sneak up behind the party, but is spotted at 60-foot distance. The carrion crawler wins the initiative throw and cuts to melee. Samwise has an opportunity to fire his sling. So, using the hit location rules found in Blackmoor, Samwise can only hit the head during a frontal attack from the insectoid, so the AC will be counted as 3. But with his halfling accuracy and at short range, he only needs an 11 to hit the head. But he misses. The carrion crawler will attempt to attack him with its tentacles, needing a 12 to hit. But it gets 8 attacks. An easy hit. He must save versus paralysis, needing a 13. Not enough. He's paralysed. And before he can be devoured by the creature, Ilara casts her sleep spell. Samwise has a 90% chance to survive the paralysis. And he manages. After putting the creature to sleep, Hilda attempts a further search of the leaves, but once again turns up nothing. As the party are brushing away leaves, distracted by this task, a dozen warriors manage to surprise them from 20 feet away, approaching from the southeast end of the tunnel, while most of the party have their backs turned. Reaction is uncertain, giving the party a moment to organise. Samwise attempts to lure 6 of the warriors into service in exchange for the gold torque inlaid with gems carried by Ilara and worth 3,000 gold pieces. This will provide a +4 bonus to the reaction roll for this offer, and a further +2 for his high charisma. So 6 of the warriors are now in the service of Samwise, and the rest continue on their own adventure. Most of these hirelings join the back of the party. Their names are Alaric, Cedric, Garrick, Leoric, Helena and Roland. So we're going to have Leoric, Helena and Roland at the front, and then in the second rank Galantia, Drago and Hilda. In the third rank Thelindra, Ilara and Nyx, and in the fourth rank Dorin, Bart and Samwise, and then in the fifth rank is Alaric, Cedric and Garrick. The party move 60 feet further into the narrow passage, and they see a pile of small stones. Hilda will search the stones, and she finds nothing. While searching, a wandering monster encounter occurs. So I don't want to exhaust my audience with the procedural repetition. So to mix things up, let's focus in on the drama from here forward. So here is an action-focused telling of the events in classic sword and sorcery fashion. From the shadows they came, 6 burglars with malice in their eyes and greed in their hearts. Silent as wraiths, they closed the distance, no more than 20 feet separating them from their prey. Their ambush was well planned, their intent unmistakable: blood and plunder. Steel flashed in the dim light as the burglars struck without hesitation, and one amongst them wore a ring that gleamed. Their daggers aimed to sink deep into unguarded backs. Like jackals, they fell upon the party's rear, seeking to overwhelm their foes before they could react. The adventurers, though surprised, turned swiftly to meet their assailants, drawing steel and forming a defensive line in the cramped corridor. The narrow space allowed only 2 to face off against 2, forcing the rest to watch and wait for their chance to join the fray. At the rear, Garrick and Alaric, 2 of the hired fighters, found themselves thrust into the fight. Their resolve was tested, but their courage held firm. They would not flee. Both lashed out with their weapons, but their strikes went wide. The burglars retaliated with vicious precision, both focusing their attacks on Garrick. Yet their daggers failed to find purchase, their blows glancing off his chainmail. The skirmish hung on a knife's edge, with neither side gaining the upper hand. The party pressed the attack. Alaric's battle hammer swung wide of a burglar that moved dexterously aside, but Garrick's strike landed true, a brutal slash with his sword that sent one of the thieves crumpling to the ground, blood pooling beneath him. The remaining burglar snarled and struck back at Garrick with savage desperation. His dagger slipped past the hireling's defences, slicing into his side. The wound was shallow, more sting than ruin, but it was enough to show the burglars would not be overwhelmed easily. As one of their own fell, another would quickly step into the gap. They pressed their attack against Garrick, two blades flashing like vipers, one strike glancing off his chain shirt, the second struck home a brutal blow that sent the hireling sprawling to the ground, his blood staining the cold stone beneath him. Cedric, his jaw clenched in fury, stepped up to avenge his fallen comrade. His morning star arced through the air, but the thief dodged deftly, the weapon rushing through empty space. The party engaged once more, yet Alaric, shaken by the sight of Garrick's blooded form, hesitated. He stood back, gripping his hammer tightly, but unwilling to step into the fray unless forced to defend himself. This hesitation gave the burglars an opening. One slipped to Cedric's flank, seeking to outmaneuver the warrior. But Cedric, a seasoned fighter, reacted swiftly. He pivoted his morning star, biting into the attacker's side. The burglar staggered, blood seeping from the wound, but he remained standing, fury etched on his face. The flanking burglar struck back, his blade grazing Cedric's armour and drawing a thin line of blood. The wound was minor. Cedric gritted his teeth, determined to hold his ground against the pressing assault. Two blades darted towards him, seeking gaps in his armour. Yet the warrior's reflexes proved sharper still. He parried one strike and sidestepped the other, leaving the burglars snarling in frustration. At last, Alaric found his nerve and stepped forward. Together with Cedric, they struck back. Alaric's swing was wild, the hammer thumping uselessly against the wall, but Cedric's strike landed true. Though his morning star drew only a thin line of blood, it was enough to stagger his foe. A dagger flashed in the dim light, and blood seeped through Cedric's tunic, yet the warrior refused to falter. His eyes burned with defiance, and with a roar of effort, he retaliated and found his mark, smashing a burglar's arm. The thief hissed in pain and snarled, refusing to yield. These foes were tenacious, and the battle showed no signs of ending soon. The adventurer's determination hardened as the battle dragged on. Two daggers lashed out at Cedric, one missing its mark, but the other plunged into his heart. With a strangled gasp, the warrior fell, his weapon slipping from his grasp. Alaric, currently the last line of defence, swung his hammer in a desperate bid to stem the tide, and with a thunderous roar, Samwise surged into the fray, his halfling frame charging forward to take Cedric's place. His attack was swift, and though his strike was parried, his sheer force left the burglars reeling, so that Alaric, seizing the moment, was able to send one of the thieves crashing to the ground, his life slipping away into a gurgled cry. Alaric took a dagger in return, deep in his forearm, but the hirelings had taken worse. A mere scratch in the grand chaos of battle. The battle had dragged on for what felt like an age. 4 burglars still stood, grim-faced but unyielding, against the tide. The wariness of the questing knight's line of defences began to show. 2 more strikes went against the burglars, but they were clumsy and poorly aimed, their weapons finding only the air as they failed to land a blow. Yet they knew if they pressed, they might shatter the burglars' resolve. So Samwise and Alaric, fueled by the fall of Garrick and Cedric, surged forward with newfound fury, becoming a crushing wave of force, cutting through the burglars' defences and badly wounding 2 of the thieves, Only one fell, and the burglars, their morale intact and driven by desperation, retaliated. 2 of them lashed out with quick calculated strikes, but Alaric and Samwise were both too quick. The assault continued with a final push, and 2 more burglars were brought low. The last of the thieves staggered, bloodied and broken, panting wildly. Samwise and Alaric glanced at one another, and then went for the kill. They soon stood victorious, breathing heavily in the aftermath of their hard-won battle. Ilara Nightshade walked forward, gracefully stepping over several pools of blood, and retrieved the ring from one of the crumpled corpses. Then she turned and ordered the party to continue with the exploration. The party retreated back up the narrow passage, taking a right turn. As they proceeded, a faint, eerie giggling echoed from the left-hand passage, encouraging them to press on to the right. The passage ahead stretched into blackness and was thick with dust that clung to the air and rested on the ground, seemingly undisturbed by recent footfalls. This did seem a reasonable place to rest until they were interrupted by large, squirming centipedes. 3 scuttled along the left wall ahead, and 3 on the ceiling above and behind. The narrow passage left little room for slingers, so the adventurers quickly drew their weapons and prepared for close quarters combat. The insects, though aggressive, were no match. In the blink of an eye, the questing knight struck, and despite the creature's speed and venomous intent, it took just a few moments to bring the gruesome insects down. Their attempts to bite and poison fell short as they were dispatched with ruthless efficiency, the creatures collapsing to the ground in a heap of broken exoskeletons. After less than 20 feet, the path appeared to dead end. A moment of confusion passed. The adventurers, experienced in the ways of hidden doors and secret passages, began inspecting the walls. Sure enough, a closer look revealed a concealed door, subtly disguised to blend with the stone. It slid open to reveal an east-to-west passage beyond one the party had previously explored. The passage's contours offered little new, yet it provided an unexpected route back through the areas they had already traversed. But for now, the party decided to move back up the dusty passages and take a different route. As they were making their way along, they began to hear footsteps that seemed to be approaching. They all held their breath, apprehensively, but fortunately for them, the footsteps seemed to fade away, perhaps turning down some other strange corridor. The party turned down a side passage. Their footsteps echoed faintly as they moved through a chamber and into a new passage, leading them past a cracked hammerhead, discarded and abandoned on the ground. Suddenly, the sound of mad, echoing laughter rang through the passage from behind them. The party quickened their pace, not daring to look back, but the laughter only grew louder, more frantic. The passage abruptly turned right, and they came to another chamber with walls looming high, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and twitch in the flickering light. A single exit passage was visible on the far wall, and the party immediately headed toward it, determined to move forward out of the chamber and away from the laughter, their nerves taut as they listened for any sign of pursuit. But the laughter ceased. perhaps having achieved its purpose of leading the party into some kind of trap. Only time would tell. The party stumbled into a Weirrat lair, and they were caught by surprise, facing 3 Weirrats and a swarm of ordinary rats. The Weirrats, though formidable in their numbers and appearance, didn't seem eager for conflict. Instead, they seemed far more interested in an exchange of information. They offered details about the underworld in return for being left undisturbed, and so some undiscovered features were scribbled onto the party's map. Samwise stepped forward then as the party's spokesperson. With his smooth words and confident demeanour, he engaged the Ratmen in conversation, seeking further negotiation. After some back and forth, the Weirrats, recognising the party's strength and will, agreed to a deal. The party would undertake a task for them in exchange for some of the treasure in their lair. The task was to deal with a roper, an unusual and dangerous creature that had made its home in a narrow tunnel somewhere in the maze. The Weirrats described the creature as a stalagmite on the ceiling, which, when approached, reveals itself to be a deadly thing. The Ratmen wanted the creature captured and delivered, as they had been using such things as deterrents in their lair. With the deal made, the party marked the location of the roper's lair on their map and set off towards it, retracing their steps back through the maze, and soon found themselves at the site of interest, a long, thin passage, much the same as any. The party had prepared themselves. Ilara passed her lantern to the front rank, and one of the warrior mercenaries, Helena Blackthorn, took it. Thylindra Shadowweave then passed a flask of oil to one of the other mercenaries, Leoric Steele. Using a lighted torch and a tearing of a tunic, they fired the ground below the stalagmite to keep it pinned and attempted to lasso it with a length of rope. The plan almost turned to disaster. The very flames made to pin the thing back prevented the party from homing in as the roper began a retreat. A second flask of burning oil was thrown behind the creature, and the party just managed to ignite this portion of ground to pin the monster in with nowhere to go. Let's switch the focus back to the gameplay now. As the roper is susceptible to fire, I will rule that it has a -4 penalty to its morale dice. And as the creature is trapped, it will become subdued, and so can be dragged using rope back to the Weirrat lair. However, first the party must solve the problem of how to avoid setting fire to the rope. For lack of a cunning plan, they will have to douse the fire with holy water. The roper has 12 hit dice, so the party will require 2 guards to keep the roper in a subdued state. This should not prove too problematic. Samwise and Alaric will perform this duty. After securing the roper, the party rest for a turn. The party drag the roper 60 feet northwest along a 5-foot wide passage until they come to a side passage leading northeast. They can hear a grating sound coming from this passage, so the retainers must pass a morale check to move in that direction. And they manage to overcome their fear. The party continue dragging the roper 30 feet along the passage which emerges into a chamber. They can hear a dripping from the northeast corner of the room where they rediscover a passage hidden behind a central stone pillar. The party now pull the roper into this 5-foot wide northeast passage. A cracked hammerhead lies on the ground. A sudden sneeze emanates from somewhere behind the party, negating any chance of them being surprised from that direction. The party finally turn right into a 10-foot wide tunnel and follow it south into the square chamber that marks the entrance to the Were-Rat lair. They exchange the roper, and true to their word, the rat men hand over a golden bangle inlaid with gems worth 4,000 gold pieces. The party take a turn to rest, and they rearrange their marching order. So in the first rank is Galantia, Drago and Hilda. Rank 2 is Thalindra, Ilara and Nyx. Rank 3 is Dorin, Bart and Samwise. Rank 4 is Alaric, Helena and Roland. And rank 5 is Leoric. So the party now leave the way they came. So the party can hear scrabbling and scuttling behind them. And this is most likely the rats under the command of the Were-Rats. The party will soon be on their last flask of oil, so they have barely 4 hours of lantern light left. They keep moving, heading westward through the maze. And before long, there is a run-in with a score and more of skeletons 60 feet ahead of the party. And the skeletons win the initiative and immediately close the gap, but not before the slingers give pass-through fire. With a firing capability equal to 7 versus half armor, the slingers score 2 hits and take out 2 skeletons before the melee ensues. So I've made some recent tweaks as to how I convert figures to troop combat. The attack as capability of the party depends on their average weapon class. So in this case, the party's front rank have a spear, a sword and a mace. So weapon classes are 8 plus 3 plus 4 divided by 3 equals 5. And the way I do it is 1 to 4 is Lightfoot, 5 to 8 is Heavyfoot, and 9 to 12 is Armoured Foot. So in this case, the party attack as Heavyfoot, and their AC is 4 plus 4 plus 3 divided by 11 equals 3. And the way I do it, any AC between 2 and 3 is Armoured Foot, 4 and 5 is Heavyfoot, and 6 and 9 is Lightfoot. So the party will defend as Armoured Foot. There are 6 skeletons in the melee, but with half hit dice they are equivalent to 3 creatures. The front rank of the party are equivalent to 7. So the skeletons will get just 1 chance to score a hit and need a 6. And they just manage it. Hilda will take a point of damage. She has 13 hit points, now reduced to 12. Brother Bart will attempt to turn some of them. He can dispel up to 2 dice in number. He turns 8 of them. 7 remain. There is no post-melee morale, as skeletons always fight to the very end. So on the second round, the front rank of skeletons is reinforced back to 6, and space will not allow them to achieve flanking positions. So once again, they get a chance to hit and need a 6 to do it. Close, but no cigar. The party gets 7 chances to hit and need a 5 or 6. They score 5 hits and manage 4 kills. The remaining creatures have no chance to hit, so are easily overcome. So the party move on to the next chamber, to the north, via a 10-foot wide passage. The floor in this passage has been reinforced by wooden planks, which creak, negating any chance of gaining surprise. Hilda searches the loose creaking planks, and as Hilda lifts several of the planks, a score or more of oversized rats are disturbed. The party win the initiative. Thalindra will attempt to cast a Phantasmal Forces spell. Her dex is 16, but her adjusted dex is 12, as she suffers a -2 penalty for a second level spell and a further -2 for her position in the second rank. But despite this adjustment, a 12 means she can cast a spell on the first segment of the combat round. The rats can make it only 20 feet by the time the spell takes effect, but are still 10 feet from the party. An illusion mimicking a firewall moves towards the vermin. They need to roll a 7 on 2d6 to overcome their fear of fire. They pass. But do they believe the illusion? A save versus spells will be appropriate here. They fail, so will take damage. So I have a lot of dice to roll here to determine hit points for the rats, as well as the damage taken. And this will be 48 six-siders. There can be some substantial rolling due to situations like this when playing solo. So my solution for avoiding this is to roll damage or saving throws for large numbers of creatures by grouping them into batches and then making a single roll for each group. So dividing the rats into groups of 4, we have a 5, a 1, a 1 and a 3. And this means that 6 rats have 6 hit points, 6 have 3 hit points, and 12 have a single hit point. So for damage rolls, I get 5, 5, 1, and 5. So comparing these to the hit points in the exact same order, I have 5 against 5, 5 against 1, 1 against 1, and 5 against 3. So this means that all the rats are wiped out by the illusion. So ahead, the uneven ground breaks off rapidly into a pool spanning 10 feet across, and a door on the north wall is fully submerged. So the questing knights will need to rid themselves of any non-buoyant weapons and metallic armor in order to swim across the pool. But first, the door must be forced open. So Hilda, after removing her arms and armor, will swim down and attempt it. It's completely stuck. She will try another door directly right, just south of the pool. So after donning her arms and armor once more, she tries this door. And this time she is successful. So beyond the door is a small room. And the party make their way across this room until they reach another door on the south wall. But no sooner than they reach this door, 4 more weirats sneak up from behind and surprise them. Perhaps these weirats were dispatched to steal back the gold bangle. So, having an inferior force, the weirats are moved by fear to reassess any attack, and instead they react positively to the party. And the party are happy to negotiate, and as they are running low on oil, they would like to find a quick way out of the underworld. So they ask for directions, and the weirats, who can speak common, provide the location of a secret door, which might help them close in on an exit. So this secret door lies beyond the door in this current room, along a passage east, and through another door and across a large and long chamber. So Hilda forces the south door open to find the corridor beyond full of smoke, which lightly obscures the party's vision, reducing them to 3/4 movement and a 20-foot visibility radius. But despite this, they still manage to see the door on the east wall because it's just 10 feet away. But this one requires a real effort to push open, but Hilda manages it. And once the party reached the large, long chamber, they will take 10 minutes to rest. So after the rest, the party moved to the far end of the chamber, to the location of the secret door. Hilda slides the stone to one side to reveal a large room with a pool in its northeast corner, with some grating above it that appears to open one way into one of the many narrow passages that make up the previously discovered kobold lair. In the centre of the room, distributed across 4 pottery jars, there is 1,000 silver pieces. And the party won't risk any attempt to carry such a load across the pool in order to reach the gate. If they wish to leave this way, they will also need to abandon their arms and armour. But they will risk this, knowing that once through the grating they are only 120 feet away from the exit leading to the surface, just above the entrance to the kobold lair. So they strip their arms and armour. The party enter the pool, one by one, and scramble up its far corner to open the grate and crawl through it. Once on the other side, they follow the narrow passage to the southeast. But suddenly they hear a high-pitched whistle, which sounds like a kobold signalling an alarm. Luckily, nothing has yet been attracted by it. The party have time. So the party move quickly until they reach the entrance to the kobold lair. And here 8 kobolds stand guard. So there will be at least one final encounter before the party can break free. The party, of course, expected these guards as they have had a run-in with them before, although it is quite possible these are not the same guards. So taking that plus the whistle into consideration, no surprise is possible. The kobolds win the initiative, but these kobolds only have 4 hit dice between them, whilst the party have significantly more. So fear is definitely a factor here. So I will grant a +3 bonus to the kobold's reaction roll. The reaction is positive, meaning that these kobolds are held back by fear, and therefore the party will request a bribe to try their luck, basically. So the kobolds will offer a measly 500 silver pieces, but the party are happy to take it and climb up into a pothole in order to reach the surface. However, it is not the outdoors they find themselves in, but one of the castle's bastions on its northern wall. So you might recall, if you've been following this campaign since the very beginning, that I randomly determined the occupants of the upper works of the Castle of the Quest. And now that the party has ventured into one of these occupied areas, it will be more challenging to procedurally generate the adventure. So in these cases, I switch from procedural play to scene play. Many solo players will probably be familiar with this kind of play, which involves generating the details of a scene and asking questions of an oracle to answer questions about this scene. And this technique is used as a way of emulating the role of the referee or game master. And the most famous example of this kind of approach is probably Mythic GM Emulator. And I've covered in some detail previously how I use a much watered down example of Mythic, customised for my own needs and to better suit an OD&D campaign. I gave some examples of its use in urban settings such as event-based adventures in towns and cities. In this episode, I will give some examples of how I have further developed my own system to handle scene play when procedural play is no longer appropriate. So to run scene-based play with OD&D, I begin by describing the scene according to expectations, and then I challenge those expectations by rolling on my challenging the scene table, which can remove features, alter features, add features, or cause the whole scene to be interrupted by a random event. I also roll for the possibility of monsters, which have a 2 in 6 chance of appearing, and treasure, which has a 3 in 6 chance if a monster is present, otherwise it's 1 in 6. And these chances are based on the distribution of monsters and treasure in D&D Volume 3. I then make a list in 2 separate columns, one for story arcs and one for story elements. And I list the important elements of the scene in the story elements column, such as NPCs and objects which are present. And in the story arcs column, I list the main goals and player characters in the scene. I list the main goals any player characters in the scene are currently trying to achieve. I then play out the scene, asking questions using my own oracle to clarify any further details required. When character actions are made that alter the scene in more than a minor capacity, I roll again on my challenging the scene table. And in regards to my oracle, I use D66 tables, and each one offers different kinds of results. I have one table which answers questions with a verb and an abstract noun, one that provides an action and a symbol or concept, and one which provides some abstract essence, activity, and form. And these are all very high-level abstract concepts designed to inspire the interpreter, and I'm still very much experimenting with their design and possible uses. This is why I have not shared my oracle on my blog yet. It's still incomplete and under-tested, but I just wanted to explain it a bit so you can understand something of how I am running things. So let's see how things go. I'll read out the input from my oracle, and I'll alter the voice effects to help you differentiate. So after emerging from a trapdoor cut into the floor, the party see that the ground floor has a reinforced door, securely barred from the inside, and a spiral staircase leading to an upper level. There's arrow slits cut into the north wall. So this is the scene. I'm going to challenge the scene now. And I get
Add feature and serene, calm vessel.
So I'm going to ask, what type of vessel is it? And the answer the oracle gave me is
Reaching tomb.
So this scene is very calm, with an air of serenity about the place. And in the centre of the floor is a very tall vessel, shaped like a funeral urn. Can the party see what is inside the vessel? I'm going to say there's a 50-50 chance. And the answer is
No.
So I'm going to rule that the vessel is 10 feet tall. Dorin Deep Delver considers climbing the vessel to peek inside. So it's steep rather than sheer, so his chance of slipping will be reduced by 2%. So I will roll a d6 to determine what the face profile of the vessel is. So the surface is smooth, so there's no adjustment for this. And using spikes and rope, there is a further 4% reduction for Dorin's chance to fall. So his base chance to succeed is 87% plus 6%. And this equals 93%. So those are pretty good odds. So he's going to attempt it. And effortlessly, he manages the climb. And this climb will cost 2 iron spikes. So question for the oracle again. What's inside the vessel?
eclipse presence idol.
So inside the vessel is filled almost to the brim with black ash. But something seemingly precious glints just below the surface of the substance. Can Dorin reach it? 50-50?
Yes.
So it is within reach of the halfling. But does the ash look harmful in any way? I'm going to say this is unlikely. And the oracle tells me...
Yes, because...
So the ash is gently smouldering. So it looks like it would be very hot to touch. So Dorin scoops the glinting object up with his steel mirror. What is it?
Fading fan.
So the object's glow fades as it begins to cool. It is a dragon's tooth. The find, once sufficiently cooled, is pocketed, and Dorin clambers back down to join the others. So Thalindra is going to examine the tooth to see if it has any otherwise hidden properties. Does it? I'm going to say this is very unlikely.
No, and...
So it's just a common tooth and a very common specimen of dragon tooth, all things considered. So Hilda attempts to unbar the door so they can reach the outside world. And this door opens fairly easily, but it does make an enormous racket. So I'm going to challenge the scene.
Altar feature. Spiral staircase. Silence, tension, arch.
The silence of the staircase is suddenly broken as the archway leading to it shakes and crumbles, shedding dust and debris, as though a large being is putting a significant force upon the stonework. Without arms and armour, there is really no chance the party are going to risk staying to find out what disturbs the peace of the bastion. So the adventurers escape through the open doorway to find themselves back in the castle courtyard, from which they waste no time in their retreat back home to the last redoubt. And so ends another adventure in the maze below the castle of the quest. So I just want to say thanks for joining me on this episode, on this particular adventure. I hope to be a little bit more productive over the coming weeks and months. So, hopefully, I'm not just saying that, and hopefully, this will come to fruition. So, thanks for listening, and I will see you in the next session. Goodbye.